I was reading Nicholas Kristof's column in the New York Times a couple of weeks ago about a young doctor in Manhattan who had been severely ill with COVID-19, but recovered when he was given a drug called tocilizumab, which is a rheumatoid arthritis drug. And I didn't know much about that drug, and so I did an internet search. And in doing that, I came across another doctor in Seattle who had been severely ill. He had to be put on a ventilator, and he'd been put on a heart-lung machine, extracorporeal membrane oxygenator, commonly known as a heart-lung machine. And he had recovered with tocilizumab, and he had also been given high doses of vitamin C. And when I saw that, my heart stopped a little bit because I was transported back about 40 years ago to a case that I had that involved vitamin C. In the late 90s, I wrote about this case that had happened about 1980 of Marty, a young girl who had become ill, and I wrote about it in a blog called Connections, where I connected the parts of the physical examination, but I also connected stories that I reminisced about as I did an examination. And so this is the story of Marty. Marty was a 26-year-old former debutante from Oklahoma. She was beautiful, she was smart, she was married to a great guy, and she had her whole life ahead of her when she came to see me complaining of congestion and a headache. I told her it was nothing serious, that it would pass. If a doctor tells you that something is nothing serious, 98% of the time, he'll be right. Unfortunately, this time I was wrong. This was the other 2%. And Marty came back to see me 2 days later saying, "My neck is killing me." And with a fever of 102 degrees, we had to put her in the hospital, where over the next 2 days, right before my eyes, she became totally paralyzed. We had to put her in the intensive care unit. She was unable to breathe for herself, and we had to put her on a ventilator. And then later we did a tracheostomy, and she became more and more paralyzed, and nothing changed. A scan of Marty's neck revealed that her spinal cord had really turned to mush, a condition called transverse myelitis, almost certainly due to multiple sclerosis, as time would later prove. 2, 3, and 4 weeks passed, and I became increasingly frustrated. I called Dr. Roger Rosenberg, who was the head of neurology at Southwestern Medical School, and told him about Marty, and he thought that she would eventually get better, that it was just a matter of time. I was not reassured because 4, 5, 6, 7 weeks passed, and Marty didn't get any better. And I was desperate, and I didn't know what to do, and neither did anybody else. And so in desperation, I made her some meditation tapes. Let the healing energy flow into your neck and heal you, things like that. And I also began giving her 20 grams of vitamin C intravenously every day. Somebody left a note on her chart that might help. I never did know where that note from the chart came from. But was it a miracle? Was it science? Was it coincidence? I didn't know what it was then, but I think I know now. But what happened was that in 3 days, Marty was breathing on her own. She was off the respirator, and we eventually were able to close her tracheotomy. The first thing she said to me when she was able to speak was, "Your tapes are boring." And that surprised me a bit, but I wanted her to do some more of those, and I wanted her to do more vitamin C. But surprisingly, she had a quiet acceptance of her condition. She would spend the rest of her life in a wheelchair. But she had this acceptance of it. I never quite understood. She told her husband, "I have to live this way, but you don't. Divorce me." And although he would continue for years to see her and support her, he eventually did. Marty moved back to Oklahoma to live with her parents in Oklahoma City. And I would occasionally get a note or a postcard or a picture from her. And I once got a tape from her saying that if she ever got really sick again, she'd want to come back to Dallas for me to care for her, because nobody could care for her the way I did. And I think in a way she was right. A couple of years after Marty recovered and moved to Oklahoma, we went to China to give some lectures, and our mothers and Cherry and I to tour China. This was about 10 years after Nixon had opened up China, but before it was really open to anybody else. When we came back, I put together about 500 slides in a slideshow that we showed several times. One time we showed it at the Oak Lawn Public Library, and in attendance was Dr. Roger Rosenberg, who came up to me afterward and complimented me on the slideshow and introduced himself. I had not met him before, but I talked to him on the phone, obviously. And I reminded myself, I need to give you a follow-up on Marty, the girl that had transverse myelitis and multiple sclerosis in her neck. And she got better after I gave her 20 grams of vitamin C intravenously. He looked at me rather skeptically and said, "Well, I enjoyed your slideshow." And that was that. About 1988 or 89 or so, about 7 or 8 years after Marty had moved back to Oklahoma, we decided that we would go see her when we went to see family in Oklahoma. And my wife called Marty to tell her we wanted to come by and see her. Her father answered the phone and said, "Who is this?" Cherry said, "Well, it's Dr. Hames and his wife. We want to come see Marty." He paused and said, "Oh, tell the doctor I just sent him a letter. Marty died last week." Many years ago, Marty gave Cherry a pair of high-heeled shoes. And she said, "I won't be needing these anymore." And to this day, Cherry wears those shoes, and we remember Marty. And so all that was in my mind when I read about the doctor in Manhattan and the doctor in Seattle, especially the doctor in Seattle who had gotten better with vitamin C. And so I did a literature search, and I found an article in the Journal of the American Medical Association of 2019 of 167 patients who were given vitamin C because they had ARDS, acute respiratory distress syndrome, and sepsis, similar symptoms that you get with COVID-19. And they were given 15 grams of vitamin C intravenously. And it improved their survival, it shortened their time in the ICU and their time on a ventilator. And I think I know why. Because you see, vitamin C is a powerful antioxidant and free radical scavenger, which means that it has very powerful anti-inflammatory properties. So I think in Marty, the vitamin C reduced the inflammation in her spinal cord and allowed some healing to occur. I wonder if Dr. Rosenberg saw that article and if he's changed his opinion about vitamin C.